Getting back to Plato's cave. Perhaps the standing prisoner starts to walk to the back of the cave in a bit of a daze. Once at the back, it becomes clearer that they are in a 360-degree circular screen theater with lots of people in their seats. It also becomes clear that a light is being projected from a central source onto all of the screens. Along each of the walls are several doors leading to various rooms. At the far back of the theater is a door labeled "Do Not Enter, Dangerous." Because the movies are surrounding everyone in 360 degrees, there is no way to escape the movie being played. Thus, the cave is described best as a bubble. This is the new world that our now standing prisoner discovers. In Truman's case, he lived in a giant soundstage dome. Meanwhile, in Pleasantville, the circular roads also made a closed bubble-like environment. When Truman got tired of the reflection, the movie set of his life, he went sailing for the edge of that bubble, and of course burst it and got a peek of reality. Though a seemingly closed space, there are openings where the force of intent beyond the bubble can enter. The force from outside the bubble, called intent, can manifest through the walls into our perception. Castaneda wrote an entire book on this topic called The Power of Silence. That book describes how spirit intent is revealed to us metaphorically, and our need to interpret that message. I believe that Castaneda called this force intent in order to reflect it as a two-way street. Our intent for truth calls outside the bubble, while outside, truth is intending to reach us. The painting on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel may reflect this interaction. This is symbolized by Sylvia in The Truman Show and by David and Jennifer in Pleasantville. They entered through an opening to provide information of the world beyond to those who would listen. We may only need one such interaction to change our lives. It seems that it was just one conversation with Sylvia on the beach that was enough to start Truman on his entire quest towards freedom and truth. For a long while, perhaps the entire remainder of his life, the prisoner might focus on trying to understand the bubble, and that makes perfect sense. I don't think it can be avoided, really. We just entered a new reality, and the natural tendency is to get our bearings. Where are we now? This stage, while an expansive one, also is the place where the trap of spirituality begins. Spiritual awakening, or enlightenment, is the trap of the standing at the back of the cave level. It is getting seduced by the love and light concepts at the back of the cave, all making promises of how they have the secret to change everything going on. This next idea about the cave does not come from Plato, but from Stephen Davis in his free online book, Butterflies Are Free to Fly. He suggests that what will happen next for the standing prisoner is to join a group. Davis claims that at the back of the cave there will not be a bunch of individual wandering prisoners, but a series of formed groups. For the prisoner, the conversations would seem likely odd, but when asked what they were talking about, the likely response would be, "We don't like the movies playing, and we are trying to change them." This would intrigue anyone after standing, the thought that the movie can be changed. There were lots of movies the prisoner didn't like. This tends to become the new guiding philosophy of the newly standing prisoner. I have to change or fix something. It may be the movies or themselves. Another common element for those out of their seats, as Davis wisely suggests, is the actual need to be part of a group. For most, it is a means of survival. One has at that point spent an entire life chained in a seat watching the movie screen. Suddenly, they are now in a new world with no idea how to act or what to do. It makes sense to try to find others who have gone through this same experience, who can offer support during the adjustment. Amazingly, though, instead of one or two large groups at the back that help with this transition, there are thousands of small groups, each with their own specific ideas. The standing person knows that they must join one, but which one? Who has the real answers? Some join a group quickly, others hunt around a while, but eventually one is chosen. While others will go from group to group looking for the winner, few find just one and stick to it throughout. A key feature about groups or organizations is that they need a leader, someone offering guidance, usually how to be just like the leader. Generally, there is always the presented end goal of being happy, loving, peaceful, and often having more money, power, and sex. Anywhere they find that that is not happening, either with themselves or others, is something they must fix. Love and light must reign supreme. Not often considered is the following. Even though it looks like we can change the movies, no matter what is tried, the basic storyline doesn't shift all that much. Even if it does alter slightly, it generally does not adjust in the way a person hopes. The basic story of life on Earth tends to be more or less the same. For all the meditation, group prayers, law of attraction, and positive thinking, is human life and the planet really any better than it was 100 years ago? 1,000? Anytime? Things seem, in fact, to be much worse. It was a hard realization for me to come to, that this entire reality is nothing but a clown show circus. Granted, at times, life is beautiful, interesting, and interactive. But the foundation is pain and suffering, for that is how the energy, loosh, is created for harvest. This place has never been any better, nor will it ever improve. The belief that things can get better is one of this realm's most insidious and ingenious traps. Everything we've been doing our entire lives, at its very core, is designed in some way to fail. That is a tough truth to see. Granted, we can affect small things in the simulation to our advantage. But since no one really understands who built the simulation, or why, or how it works, all such things are just hopes shouted to the wind. Go beyond the simulation entirely. A key element of Dante's Inferno is the quote, "Abandon all ye hope who enter here." Actually, it's "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." That is not meant to be a message about entering hell. It is about entering truth. For as long as one has hope, they are tied to the simulation and to the false self. False and hope go together, but in the realm of truth, hope is never required. The love and light myth is probably the most insidious trap of our times. It produces in people the same effect as any drug. It makes you feel good for a short time, only to crash from its loss and go looking for the next hit. Over and over again, the spiritual community are junkies, looking for another light being, another Reiki session, another smile on their face in meditation. They have been tricked into thinking that they are evil if they have a negative thought or get angry. Righteous anger is what would be needed for change. Sitting smiling at a wall pretending you are Buddha is going to ensure continued enslavement. Love and light spirituality is the blue pill of Morpheus, and the average person cannot get enough of it. And that is what you have to walk past if you want to really understand how to leave Plato's cave. Everyone is asking questions about the nature of reality to some degree or another. A few dabble in it for a few minutes a week, in between cheeseburgers and football matches. Others read some books and attend lectures, while a few do some inner work in these areas. In one sense, everyone is doing the best he or she can, given the lack of guidance this realm provides, and the number of challenging situations it constantly manifests. However, you have to do better than what most people think is their best. If you want truth, home, totality, you are going to have to walk to find the final stage of alchemy. Not just how the world is an illusion, but who created it and why. You will have to uncover all the tricks used, because unless you can know the layers of the tricks, you can still be tricked. There will be so much false light of Lucifer that to discern light from dark is going to become the task of a lifetime. Recently, somebody asked me, if there's no karma, then does it make any difference whether you're a nice or a jerk in this life? Actually, it does. The after-death experiences pretty much indicate that there will be a life review, but that review is not there to help you. The life review in the afterlife is there to present your life in such a way as to bring up feelings of guilt, shame, and disappointment. Who doesn't have past moments you wish would have been done differently? Those feelings easily get manipulated to trick us to coming back here. Of course, we are humans placed in this world with no memory of anything, no guidebook on how to live, and we have our lives manipulated by these very control beings. As such, the practice of recapitulation is more vital than I thought previously. It is not just to clean your energy or reintegrate yourself from past experiences while alive. Those are secondary gains. The recapitulation is meant to prepare you properly for that after-death review, to know our past inside and out. Nothing can be thrown at us as a surprise. You want to be able to say to everything shown, yes, I know about that, it was a challenge, or I was under some stress, I've seen the event and myself, and have come to better understand who I was then and why I acted that way. I'm okay with all that now, and I'm no longer that person. I'm absolute awareness, and I've transformed. Next. This is what the full life recapitulation is meant to do. And now I see it has to be a full life recapitulation, since a partial version is not going to create this total clarity of the after-death review. The more of a good life you live, the more honest and kinder you were, just means there will be fewer events stuck to your energy body to be presented in the after-death state review. We live well, so we have less to be ready for. We keep up with our recap until nothing is hiding or still attached to the past experiences. The less we are tied to it, the less likely we are to be tricked by the false ideas of karma, or that your choices were all of your free will. They weren't. What can be found at the back of the cave has some value, for a while. I'm not diminishing these practices totally, because they have a place. There is a reason the various traditions like alchemy and native medicine had ways and steps of learning. You have to move forward, but in an order that is clear and safe for the body, mind, and spirit. Try to jump too quickly, and one is likely to land in quicksand. But once you enter the final stage of the process, where exiting the cave can become a possibility, you can't bring the lower levels with you. You have to see them for what they are, a valuable step at a valuable time, but no longer valid to where you're heading. And so it is going to sound like I'm critical in this book to most everything in the spiritual and religious landscape, but that is how it has to be in the final stage. Of course, there will be moments when some of those practices or beliefs of the early stages are needed, so go back and touch them lightly, then allow them to float away and return to your task. The task at hand is to go through the exit, through the eye of the needle. And you cannot bring anything through the eye of the needle, not even yourself. Through that needle is freedom, totality, and truth. The power of your whole being you have intuited is there within you, but never fully realized. Most who do begin to enter this final stage do not move far because they will not let go of all of their prized knowledge, beliefs, and exercises at the lower levels. They will hold so tightly to it that they become stuck in the quicksand of the work. They stop the final journey before it ever starts by not allowing themselves to be made over fresh. No one is digging into knowing what this reality actually is. They are focused on their wishes and hopes for it. Can you change a computer simulation designed to create suffering and slavery? Technically, you can if you have access to the basic program and you know how to program in that particular language. Do you think these various spiritual groups have access to any of that? They do not, no matter how much they try to convince themselves that they do. As a result, none of the groups milling around behind the seats can produce any of the claims they promise to their followers. What help they can provide is at best individual assistance. While that in itself could be rather useful, ultimately it is minor. The groups offer excuses as to why their claims are never reached, such as no pain, no gain. It can take years and maybe even hundreds of lifetimes for the teaching to work. We don't have enough members, or the most damaging excuse of all, you must be doing something wrong, or you are not spiritual enough. Of course, the group itself and its teaching cannot possibly be flawed, so it must be every individual member's fault. Most of the seekers in those groups are very nice people who you really want to be your friends. Intelligent, well-meaning, caring. In fact, they're so nice that you tend to overlook the basic flaws in the system they are part of. While it appears the groups are offering much more freedom, knowledge, and guidance, everyone seems to forget a key point. They are all still in the cave. Albeit in a slightly better position than chained to their seats believing the movie, but they continue in the realm of the Matrix. All groups, techniques, or ideas have an infinitesimally minute chance of reaching the promises they sell. The success rate will either be very low or totally absent, especially when it comes to constant bliss. This realm is not set up for constant bliss, no matter what the gurus try to say. In fact, the only way to live in long-term overly happy states is to be in total denial of the final level of this work. That is why it tends to be the ones who seem the most spiritual, loving, and enlightened are in fact the ones in the deepest denial of what really awaits them when they die. Granted, I have nothing against love, enjoyment, and being. I appreciate when they are in my life fully. I just know that no matter how enjoyable they are in the moment, they will not last, nor do I require them to. 2020 to 2022 has been a great presentation of this. If all of these so-called great teachers of truth cannot see the biggest relative lie of modern human history playing out in front of their eyes every day for 2 straight years, how can they possibly be trusted to see the great lies that obscure absolute truth? All the gurus preaching freedom and liberation have just disappeared. They followed the rules to give up their own freedoms and suggested to their followers that they do the same. Or they simply stayed silent and did not comment on the loss of freedoms going on around them. Is this someone who you would really want to trust you to lead you towards ultimate freedom if they have no sense of relative freedom? The problem is they believe they've reached the top of the mountain, while instead they are comfortable in a chair halfway up, selling postcards of the view someone else took from the top. Few ever ponder the notion, maybe none of the groups work. It is another reason why seeking is the problem, because the person seeks for something that does not actually exist. The promise of the group can never be found. The underlying issue is that the entire group, including its leader, are still in and operating within the cave theater, which means there is not much difference between everyone as it appears. Without having exited the theater, no one really knows much about anything. Knowing everything only comes by looking at the one place that has been ignored, the door at the back of the cave with the gigantic warning sign on it. I feel it might take what I label an outside force to finally examine the confining elements of the cave, to hear that force's message like a homing signal, and to eventually go looking for the way to reach it. While still being in a body, you can only have a glimpse of what it's like outside, which is why I recommend getting information from a few different people who claim to have seen the exit, and put that information together like a jigsaw puzzle. The real answers will not be found in groups, but in outcasts, longers, and wanderlings, ones who are in society but not really. What these people say is so radical because they have no real suggestions about improving the cave. They don't care about the cave, any more than they must for day-to-day functioning. They see that the cave is insane. Always has been, always will be. As such, they put their focus not on the matrix, but on their exit. To go further, a standing prisoner is going to have to create their own personal path, one that suits them, not something that is standard, that is for the masses. Those systems just lead to being a slave to be born and die over and over again. To exit the cave is to see fully and reject the lies, tricks, and contracts placed on the soul so that you can become your natural state, whole, total, powerful, and free. Do keep in mind that if you are in a prison cell, the method of escape is first to fully understand how you got into that cell, then to examine every inch of it and to know it intimately. Then a plan can be formulated. We as a species have done some decent work on the exploration of our prison. The problem is that it usually gets turned into, how can I fix it? If instead we take all that information and point it toward how to exit, all that examination of the cave will then become of some value. If not, we just spend time knowing our cell for very little gain. Plato's cave is not the material world. Many get caught in that idea because of the way the allegory is presented. This is another missing element to it. Plato's cave consists of every layer of false reality. That is not just the material world, but other material worlds, astral worlds, akashic worlds, angelic worlds, pretty much any world where there is something to observe. Even the void, where there is only nothing to observe, are still Plato's cave. That is a part of the challenge. There are lots of layers that one can be within the cave and falsely believe you are outside of it. What does Plato's allegory have to say about exiting? Again, not much. Actually, in the story, the prisoner does not get to leave completely. He only gets a glimpse and then is sent back inside the cave. And he does not leave by his own free will. The allegory asks, what if a prisoner was dragged outside? Well, why drag a prisoner outside? Can he not go out willingly? Plato discusses none of this, but goes on to show how the prisoner sees the sun, how it hurts his eyes, and how it would take time to adjust to it and get used to this new reality. The next part is interesting. Plato now claims that in this situation, the prisoner would think that outside the cave is far superior to inside, and would want to return to help his fellow prisoners escape. What is this light he is seeing, inferred to be our real sun? My guess is that this is the white light of the death experience, which is claimed to be blinding yet beautiful by those who have experienced it. This is a key part of the trap. To go to the white light is to be brought back in the matrix, back into the cave, as has happened to the prisoner. The allegory states that the prisoner returns with no mention of how, and that the prisoner will want to help his fellow prisoners escape. Yet, how could he help with that because he did not escape? He was dragged out. Plato claims that the returning prisoner would be blinded by the cave light on re-entering, the fire being the demiurge, laughed at by the prisoners who had claimed the trip outside hurt him. Eventually they would kill him and anyone else who attempts to take them on a similar journey. Most think this is where the allegory ends, but this is where it tends to be finished in most presenters' examinations. But the story continues for a few more pages, and it is an odd discussion between Socrates and Glaucon occurs. Its brief discussions on a number of subjects, light and darkness, the nature of the soul, what is good, and turning away from sensual pleasures. It just feels like a totally different writer. I wonder if this is similar to many New Testament writings, where you can clearly notice two different writing styles in the same book, where a new writer took something from an older document, discarded some of it, and then rewrote a new narrative. One would think the Plato's cave ending might answer the missing questions mentioned above, but the final part is a few paragraphs discussing the state and how people are benefactors of the state. A few specific sentences near the end make me question the validity of the entire story. I will give an overview of the key lines. The business of us, who are the founders of the state, will be to compel the best minds to attain that knowledge which we have already shown to be the greatest. But, when they have ascended and seen enough, we must not allow them to do as they do now, remain in the upper world. But this must not be allowed. They must be made to descend again among the prisoners in the den, and partake of their labors and honors, whether they are worthy having or not. Is Plato saying that those who are able to escape the cave and reach the truth should not be allowed to stay there, but made to descend again back to the world of prisoners? The ending of this story, and the story itself, could be more about control and enslavement, and not any sort of escape, as a researcher might think. Did the prisoner really reach the outside, or just what we might call the astral realm? That is not a real exit. The real exit would be beyond this new world, beyond the astral realm, beyond the light, beyond everything. Even if the prisoner tells of his journey on returning to the cave, it is but half an exit. Perhaps others, on hearing the story, will realize that they are outside the cave and decide to come back inside it. Either tricked by ideas of karma and sin, so that they have to return in order to learn and grow, or something altruistic to save people, or the cave itself. A few will just barter a deal to make them special and important here, as Cypher did in the Matrix, selling their soul for some false material things. The place this prisoner could have been dragged to as a way of presenting false hope to those standing in the back of the cave is a place almost the entire spiritual community is attempting to reach: oneness, self-realization. It is presented by the main teachers out there that the goal of spiritual work is to reach a state referred to by various words: awakening, enlightenment, non-duality, oneness, and several others. It is a core concept of most traditions, from Advaita to Buddhism to shamanism. Yet awakening in the dream is not awakening from the dream. I wrote much about this in Falling for Truth, and it is an important part of the process. It is when you come to see that everything in this reality is an illusion, including yourself, a manifestation of a greater self, that you are absolute, total, empty, yet complete. The problem always is with context. What I have just described can also be claimed as awakening within the dream. It is presented as if that is the end of the whole game here. How could it not seem so, especially for one that it has happened to? Oneness, Absolute. What could possibly be beyond that? And so they stay here and become the spiritual guides of that generation. Another trap has been set. The enlightened gurus like to present well-received catchphrases. We are all one. We are love. There's nothing to fear. It's all in good hands. Be present. Be peaceful. They're not totally wrong, of course, and that is what makes it all so challenging. They are correct up to the end of the early alchemic stages. In the real ancient traditions, when someone had reached this level, they would have been given some time to get used to it and to integrate how their physical form and mind needed to transition with this. But that would be only for a period. The newly awakened would be reminded that they are not fully done yet. There is a final stage. Besides, no one is questioning which oneness these people awoke to. There is a oneness outside of the matrix itself, known as the pleroma in Gnostic literature. This is very complex, and I will get into it later in the work when discussing the Nag Hammadi documents. Then there is the void oneness, known as the clear light of Dzogchen Buddhism. It is a still place in the matrix, the womb of reality, from where all material forms and experiences manifest. It is not dark or black, but contains everything and nothing. It is without time or space, a place that is non-dual, has no polarity, of total awareness and stillness. Reaching the void while still in a body will lead to a deep experience of peace and clarity. Who wouldn't want that? It's as good a foundation as one can get here, and even that can be a helpful tool after one dies. It is the first stepping point for many after death, and one can stay here for a long while if desired. In fact, that is one of the values of reaching this place in life and getting comfortable with it, so that you can go there directly, instead of towards the false white light. But the void is not the real absolute. The void is still in the simulation. The Gnostics were clear that our reality is a copy, and to be a copy there must be that which you copy from. In this case, the void would be the copy of a more complete absolute, which is why it is easy to believe you've reached the real, and not a simulated copy of the real. Oneness is part of the package of understanding. The Gnostics remind us in the first apocalypse of James that a discussion with the archons will happen after we die, and that this text suggests that we have to answer certain questions correctly. Many of those responses include that you know you are not a material form, that you come from the pleroma, true oneness, which is your real home, and that they, demiurge and the archons, are not from that realm, thus have no power to keep you locked here. The Egyptian Book of the Dead has a similar question and answer session where the deceased has to know all the names of a boat, the boat being the symbolic parts of reality. Of course, the question and answer might not occur, only a metaphoric explanation of what concepts must be kept in our awareness and energy body in the after-death realm. The problem, as my book points out, is that this type of spiritual work is just half of a giant puzzle. It does not matter how awake or enlightened someone is if they do not know what the after-death reincarnation trap is or how a simulated matrix has been placed over this reality. The other side of this work is to see that this is a world of control and manipulation, and that everything in our world from the standpoint of society, government, science, banking, history, education, medicine, law, media, are all but a series of deceptions. And it is not just the earth realm. Everything we can see and not see is part of the matrix. The planetary realm is another lie, as is the astral realm. All there to make us hosts for non-physical parasitic entities. The material world operates as a parasite because that is how it was created, a mirror-generated simulation of a much more real reality. Navigating through, it is helpful to know the concepts of void and oneness, for you become harder to manipulate, but you will likely be manipulated and returned if you do not understand the cycle. Those who stay in love and oneness after death might feel good after the transition, but they are likely to follow dead grandma, Jesus, or the angelic beings into the tunnel of light because it feels so loving and feels so good. And voila, back into this mess they come. Nirvana is a real place, but it is not home. No matter how good and peaceful it may feel, the soul can never really rest there. In time, it will get restless. Plato's cave is an endless deception machine, a machine that has more layers to it than one can imagine. That is why it is so hard to exit. There are so many layers one has to break through. Until one sees that this realm is an evil artificial simulation trap of the soul, the essence, the chances of exiting are slim. That includes the so-called awakened enlightened teachers out there. They might have had a more peaceful run here, sitting on their chairs and speaking to everyone through a microphone with a smiley look on their face, but they will likely be back here the same as those who had no interest in spiritual matters. Recall in Plato's story that the only prisoner who leaves the cave was dragged out. Even in the allegory, the prisoner didn't want to go on his own. Take that to heart. My honest guess, and I mean this seriously, is that 1 in 10 million will get past the reincarnation trap. That is 100 for every billion. That might be it. And so, don't automatically think that your so-called guru or enlightened teacher will be one in that 100, or even you. Most of those who do exit will likely be people no one ever heard of, because they did their inner work alone, perhaps never even mentioning it to close family members. Remember that if one falls for the reincarnation trap, that person will be put into a new body after a Westworld style memory wipe. Everything from this current life will be forgotten. Then, even the knowing of oneness and existing in the non-dual void will be for naught. Back in a new body and having to do all their spiritual work over again. Think about that. All the great inner work that was done by these people, and some have done great work to say the least, would all be lost in the memory wipe if they follow the light bridge and get placed back into a new body. You know the guru type will try to convince you, if you bring this up, that they are so far advanced they would be able to take all their memories into a new body, or they are about to become a light being, or a light worker, or some other name with light. Make no mistake, they will be back here, ignorant just as they were previously. Seeing truth tends to happen from trauma, not peace. The more one has to question this insane reality that surrounds them, the more likelihood they might see past this to the realm's origin. Richard Rose often mentioned to his students, you don't want peace, you want answers. And so, I say, if you're going to do all this work and illusion busting in this life, why not go all the way? Because if you don't, you will lose all the gains you made here. Do the deep inner work, not to have a better life, an easier life, a more important life, but to know truth and self so fully that you can do the only task we have ever had: return home.